My name's Guy Kestevan. I've been a professional bike and kit tester for 25 years. And this is the technical talk round on the brand new ultra top end Scott Scale RC SL. So hopefully you've already watched the live ride review. If you haven't, make sure you jump to that to get an idea how this bike rides. The idea of this video is to discuss all the technical points, just go through the geometry and the features in a way that you can see them nice and clearly, and then to complement the actual kind of ride characterization and ride impressions that I've got on the trail. So as you can see, obviously it's a hardtail and it's a cross-country hardtail. But so as you can see, it's a hardtail, but for Scott, this is a super important model. Basically makes up half of their mountain bike sales, and it's particularly popular Southern Europe and actually Central America, where there's still a huge cross-country racing culture. But also there's some interesting features on it that make it far more suitable as a trail bike than most bikes in this category. For a start, the geometry, proper radical. Basically, well, it's proper radical for hardtails. So this is set up slack at the moment, 66.7 degree head angle. But if you just switch the headset cups, you just loosen them, rotate them, that gives you, each cup gives you 0.6 degrees of angle change. So in the steeper position, it's 67.9 degrees. And that's something you can do in just a few minutes. Or you can swap the cups out entirely to a neutral head angle halfway in between that. That's based around this 100mm Fox 32 SC fork in there, which is standard fitment. And then another radical number on it is the effective seat angle, 77.4. I mean, that's tri-bike territory. That's super aggressive. We're seeing that on kind of long travel enduro bikes and some e-bikes now, where they're really focused on super technical climbing. But if you've watched the live ride review, you'll realize that it actually works far better than I was expecting on this bike as well. It's got a superb poise for getting the power down, and it's an all-new construction that Scott have used for this one. So the whole front of the monocoque, the whole front of the main frame is monocoque, and then essentially they just add the stays on there at the end. Previously there's been junctions down near the bottom bracket and then up on the top tube as well, and the seat tube has been separate. But this enables them to make a much stiffer structure overall, and it's also been lengthened as well, so it's 20mm longer in all sizes. So it's 463mm now in terms of reach on this large size. Rear chainstays stay the same though, so still very punchy and direct at the saddle. And you can see just about enough room to squeeze a 2.4-inch tyre in there. And going back to the construction, Scott basically it's a frame of two halves, to use the old footballing cliche. You've got what they call the stiffness section, which is from this oversized down tube all the way down through the down tube. Bottom bracket area, it's press fit for maximum width, and then this super deep chainstay and brand new dropouts as well. I mean, you can't see it here obviously, but the dropouts are now hollow, so they're basically just an extension of the tubes, which not only makes them lighter, it also means that Scott can create a stiffer setup. And if you flip it around to look at the other side, the insert actually bolts directly onto the inner face of the chainstay, so there's no compression at all of that tube. And again, it just means the axle can be a bit shorter. So that just that change in the dropout design saves them 20 grams. And there are other areas where they've saved weight as well. This little chain guide here, that's replaceable now, so you can take that off if you don't feel you need it. And looking under here, you can see there's a little pop-in, pop-out door that you can remove, either to get that chain guide out of the way, or just to feed in something like a dropper post cable. I mean, it doesn't come with that as standard, but you know, it's a standard size seat post. It's not a massive one like Scott used to use, so you can fit pretty much any seat post, any dropper seat post you wanted in there. And if you look up at the front, although this is wireless, which obviously tidies things up, you can see that the brake cable you've got going to the rear actually goes inside the head tube now via this little scoop on the side of the stem, and that means you've got no need for cable ports on either side of the frame. So again, that saves weight. And other features like the bottle cage bosses are now mounted on little sort of clip-in inserts, so you can have blanking plugs if you want, or you can have a standard bottle cage. And again, it's you know, and the extra benefit of that is not only is it lighter, and they can make the tube walls lighter because essentially it clamps from both sides of the tube, so you don't need to reinforce the eyelet. But it also means if you do strip a bottle mount, you can just easily pop a brand new one in there. And they've gone for a conventional seat clamp as well, and like I say, it's conventional seat diameter too. And looking at the offset here, I mean, it's obviously been blended here, so you've got some flow going through the design language from this super flat. I mean, if you look at that, that's properly flat top tube there. And then it slides into a slight step down on the seat stays. They actually tried it with a deeper step down, but they found that gave them a lot of fore and aft flex in the seat post, but not a load of vertical compliance. So they actually brought the seat stays back up again to get where they wanted to with the frame stiffness on this. And it's quite interesting talking to the designers at Scott. I'm going to do a Scott factory tour as well to go with this. This isn't the stiffest or the lightest bike they built during their testing program. It's very much a blend of what they found between a mixture of FEA analysis on the computer and stress modeling in their test lab, and then actual riding. This was a really, really good balance. And interesting, this SL is actually in the lab slightly less stiff than the HMX and HMF bikes. But because of the nature of the carbon fibre, because it's got more ultra high modulus in it, if they made it as stiff as those bikes, which are heavier, then it actually was way harsher. And so this has got a much more kind of balanced ride feel. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still seriously stiff. This is a proper take no prisoners race bike, but it's not as belligerently brutal as it could have been. And on the subject of weight, this HMX SL frame is 847 grams now for a medium with all the hardware included, so that sets it apart from a lot of frame weights you'll hear. But from my experience, Scott are always super accurate and super honest with what their frames and bikes weigh in at. And then in the HMX, which is the next level down, it's 912 grams. And then in the HMF, it's still only just over the kilo mark at 1013 grams. And in comparative to previous scales, that's 32 grams lighter than the old HMX SL, and over 130 grams lighter than the HMF, which is the most affordable frame. And interestingly, the actual carbon on the bike, because it's longer, because it's stiffer, because it's stronger, the actual frame is heavier. But because they've made all these changes in terms of the hardware and the little smarts with the rear dropouts, etc., that's what makes the overall frame weight lighter. And that puts, like, again, when I was chatting to the engineers, they've not tried to make it the lightest possible bike. Their intention was to make it the bike they wanted it to make. They didn't want to get in a stiffness fight for German magazines. They didn't want to get in a who's got the lightest frame fight. They were very, very confident in the performance of the bike, and obviously it's been an incredibly successful race bike, both with their Scott Pro teams and privateer races as well. And they just wanted to keep that vibe alive, and yeah, they've done an absolutely great job. Like I say, properly stiff, a real power player, but still a surprisingly versatile bike. Because one thing I haven't talked about, again, it's in the live ride review, but they actually produce an option of a rigid carbon fibre fork as well for this bike. So suspension corrected to the same length as this 32, but with fully rigid legs, weighs 605 grams. So you're saving nearly a kilo off the weight of this bike. And it also comes with 3 everything cage mounts down the leg as well. So it's a proper bona fide bike packing fork. So if you wanted 29 by 2.4 wide tyre wheels, and the comfort and kind of control they bring, plus that radical handling angles, you could have a bike packing bike that weighs just over 8 kilos. And interestingly, this scale frame is actually over 100 grams lighter than the Addict Gravel that Scott produced for gravel racers. So just goes to show, yet again, actually having something with drop bars isn't necessarily your best bet for gravel. Certainly if you like it on a more aggressive size, or super gravel, as Scott were using the term earlier. So kind of that's the frame talked about. Like I say, this is the HMX SL, which is the absolute top end frames. And then you get the HMX and the HMF, which are more price pointed ones. And then you get a range of alloy sparks as well. So if you combine all the different models as well, with different component specs on them, you're getting 24 Scott scales now, including the Contessa women's bikes. But this, as you might have guessed while I've been working around on the geometry and the frame features, this is the proper premium spec. This is the RC SL. So this bike comes in at 8.9 kilos, complete for a medium, which again, you know, you could definitely go lighter, which is, you know, well, let's talk about some of those elements that are why I'm saying that. For a start, it comes, well, it's an XX1 top of the range SRAM chainset. It's actually the power meter version. Again, this is a proper racer's bike, so those guys are going to want power information on there. And it's got 2.4-inch tyres, you know, Recon Race, front and rear. It's what Nino uses, and again, exo protection rather than anything super light and sketchy. So pretty durable trail tyre with actually some reasonable tread on it, not the skimpiest and lightest option they could have gone for. Box SC32, definitely a very light fork. And even these incredibly trick, best part of €1,000, trick stuff Piccolo brakes are still clocking in at kind of 370 grams or so, and it's got a 180mm rotor on the front rather than the 160. But while we're down here, look at this madness. You've got Scott's, well, Syncross, which is their partner component brand, Silverton SL wheel set, as loved by Nino on the stiffer course, on the less bruising courses, and on Thomas Pidcock on pretty much every course he rides. I mean, he won the Olympics on these wheels, even though he's obviously not a Scott athlete, and Nino's won a whole bunch of races and indeed world championships on these wheels. 1280 grams these are for a 30mm wide internal rim, and as you can see, it's pure carbon construction. Basically, this whole wheel is made in one piece and then prized apart, and then that hub spacer put in the center there. And it's insanely stiff. It's actually 50% torsionally stiffer than a standard wheel set, and they reckon about 30% laterally stiffer as well. So if you want a wheel set that's going to make this bike absolutely its most kind of responsive and dramatically precise, this is the obvious pick. As you'd expect, you've got SRAM XX1 wireless with that nice oil can coloured chain set on there. Like I say, you've got a fixed Syncross post. You've got a Syncross Belcara saddle, which is, again, fully one-piece moulded. There's no bonding there. It's just all... it's actually basically injection moulded carbon fibre, and then a thin layer of EVA padding moulded on top. So 150 gram seat on there. And then up front, you've got this Fraser IC SL cockpit and stem combo, 740mm width, and then you've got this Syncross grips and then the axis controller on there. And because it's a Scott, you need some kind of remote control for your suspension, so you've got 2-position lockout and release on the Fox fork there. But although it is, you know, a super light, super stiff spec all the way through, and again, you've got that internal routing on there, there's some really practical touches on this bike as well. For a start, you've got the option of either a stem cap mount for your Garmin, or you can actually fit an out front on there in 2 different lengths, depending on which Garmin you're running. But one little feature I really like is, let's see if I can get it out without knocking the bike over. Bear with me. Not the slickest. You've got a little plug in there for a tubeless worm on that side, and then on the other side of the bar, you've actually got the knife to trim that down. So you've got a tubeless kit as standard on the bike. And then if we flip round to the other side of the bike, you can see not only have you got post mount brake there for maximum compatibility with different designs, and also it's a lot easier, according to the Scott engineers, it's a lot easier to make a stiffer, more consistent mount for the brake. It's about the only place on the bike that still has an alloy insert. They've pretty much chased all the metal out the frame otherwise. But also the handle on the axle, I'm not going to try and pull it out because I'll disturb the bike and tip it over. And I haven't got a final price on this, but I think I heard mentioned in the region of 12 to 13,000 euros. So this is not a bike I want to accidentally knock over. I've already got it dirty, splashing through puddles here in Switzerland. But that handle comes out and it's got a T25 driver on the end of it, so you can do up pretty much all your bolts that you need to on your bike with an onboard tool. And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about Bluetooth tyre pressures, but I do know that you need to run very low tyre pressures on these wheels just because they're so damn stiff. You have got Quark Airwiz tyre sensors, tyre pressure sensors fitted as standard. This really is a proper masterpiece in terms of evolution of an already extremely successful race bike, but also with those fork options and with the neat practical touches within the spec of a far more rounded bike than you normally get in this category, where it's normally just pure weight chasing and, you know, aggressive minimalism. This is actually a surprisingly practical and usable bike. So that's the tech talk done on this absolutely beautiful, oh yeah, that's one thing I forgot to mention, that's specific lightweight paint, and they've only used it on the front end. The rest is just a matte lacquer over naked carbon, again just to chase as much weight out of the frame set. They really have gone to the nth degree on this bike to make it perform as dramatically as it does. So with that in mind, do make sure you watch the live road review if you haven't already. But massive thanks to Scott for inviting me over to the scale launch here at their headquarters in Freiburg. Like I say, there will be an HQ tour video as well. Massive thanks to my Patreon supporters for backing the channel with a small monthly pledge, and they get extended early and behind the scenes ad-free edits as a thank you, and their contributions make it a lot easier for me to justify creating these videos and content outside my normal testing schedule. So if you really like what I'm doing, please consider joining those guys whose names are scrolling up now on Patreon. But click for notifications, become a subscriber if you haven't already, because again, the more subscribers I get, the more likely I am to be invited on launches like this. And yeah, give it a thumbs up, like, but tell your mates as well. These Scott XC videos tend to be super popular, so I'm hoping for good numbers on this one. But obviously, the more you share the word on me talking about bikes, the more those numbers grow, and the more manufacturers will be getting me on board to reveal their latest and greatest machines like this ahead of the game. But make sure you check out the live ride video to see just how fast and ferociously this bike can be ridden. Not necessarily by me, by the other guys on this press trip who've been leaving me behind, and the Scott engineering and lunch ride crew, because the way those guys ride and the speed they ride at really tells you a lot about the experience that's been built into this machine. It's not just Nino giving them feedback on this bike that's made it as quick as it does. These guys are absolutely savages, so it's no surprise that this is a proper take no prisoners, ultra fast, zero compromise race weapon. But for now, I've been Guy Kesteven on Guy Kest TV, outside the Scott HQ in Freiburg, talking about Scott's Scale RC SL.